Hi everyone, this is Sharon. Today I'm talking about something that's really near and dear to my heart, and that's how the way you eat impacts the planet and our environment. And I have a special guest with me today, Stacey Ramirez. Hi Stacey, how are you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to have you with me today because Stacey is really passionate about the environment as well. She's a registered dietitian like myself, and she goes by the term dietitian for the planet. And she's really interested in how our eating style can really impact future generations. So welcome, Stacey, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started along this path of being interested in sustainability?
I'm Stacy. I have two kids, so a lot of what I do is for them. I think a lot of the sustainability stuff started when I started going to college, just because I guess just moving out of my parents' house, that's when I kind of realized like nothing is infinite and that, most people just kind of live at a pace where it's not really sustainable for the planet in the long term, like driving a lot and just, not really being mindful of like how much they consume and how much plastic goes into landfills, things like that. That's probably when I really became interested in sustainability. So when I first started college, then when I had kids, that's when I really just realized like I wanted to make the most of my life. And I just got back from living in Mexico for a year and a half. And during that time I didn't work. I was just stay-at-home mom. But I had a lot of family there also to help me with the kids. So I found myself with a lot of free time, not as much time like doing chores and stuff because there were a lot of people living there. So that's when I really started researching a lot more like the link between nutrition and the planetary's health or the planet's health. So that was when I kind of just started like an Instagram page and I was like, I'm just going to be anonymous at first in case I like just make a fool out of myself, I guess. And then I eventually just got to like, whatever, I feel pretty confident in what I'm talking about. And so that's when I just started making a lot more posts about nutrition and how, what we eat can make an effect on the planet and how, it's all kind of connected and how the planet is, the planet's state is also going to affect our nutrition and our health. So I think it's all extremely connected and that's how I kind of got into it.
Yeah, that's really interesting how, a lot of people might not realize this, but dietitians, we don't get a lot of education on sustainability, but yet I feel that we should be experts in this area because there is a lot that people can do with their regular eating habits that can make an impact on the planet. So I think that's really great that you kind of chose that area. And I've done the same thing in my career. I went back and got my master's in sustainability, master's in sustainable food systems, because I was so interested in it and I wanted to get, more of just an in-depth focus on that in my career. So I think that's really cool that you've done that. And now, where do you live now?
I'm currently in Grapevine, Texas.
Okay.
We're back.
Great.
Yeah.
So one of my first question is really about this idea. Is it really as bad as people think it is, or should we really be concerned about the environment in terms of, things like climate change and how people could make a difference with their diets and their eating habits?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of room for change. It's kind of hard to tell like what the future of the planet is going to be like because I think every year things just change. I mean, even in my lifetime, I'm 30 and I've seen like, I just feel like there's a big difference between what the world was like when I was a kid. Granted, when you're a kid, everything just seems bigger. And what it seems like now, just like even like not seeing it in as many bugs outside. Like during summer, I remember it used to be bajillions of bugs and lightning bugs and grasshoppers and things like that. And even now I don't know, I've noticed things like changes like that just in my own lifetime. So I just feel like now is the time. Like if we're going to make a change, we should really, really focus on now because, we have seen more extreme weather and just a lot of change in the way we manage our land and everything like that. So I think our diet can make a big impact on, moving forward. I think that our food system and climate change go hand in hand. As we know, the food production is very intensive on the planet. 1/3 of greenhouse gases come from the food production system of all of them, you know, like vehicle transportation of everything. 1/3 of those greenhouse gases are a direct result of food production. 70% of the world's fresh water is, you know, used by the food production system. 40% of the world's land is used for food production. So, you know, making food for just humans is very energy intensive, very resource intensive. And so if we can make better food choices, you know, choosing to eat foods that aren't as water consuming, that don't require as much land to produce, you know, calories and grams of protein per pound or whatever, then I think that there is a lot of room for improvement, you know, just simple food choices. I think they can make a big impact on our planet.
I think you summed that up really well about how, you know, our population is growing and our resources are more limited. The planet's getting hotter. We know these things are happening.
Yeah.
And just climate change alone is impacting, you know, with the fires that we're seeing, with the
in California
melting, and it's going to impact our food production with droughts, extreme weather events. It'll be harder to grow food. So these are all things we have to worry about, and we all have, you know, a role to play, I believe, which really brings up my next question is, can we really make a difference with our diet? I mean, some people will say, oh, it's really not that important. You know, it's about transportation or, you know, there's more hype. But how do you feel about, you know, that what we can do as an individual when it comes to the way we eat?
So this is what I dedicate my whole Instagram to and a lot of my time to. So I do believe that food choices can make a difference. I think just like your food choices can make a difference in your body's health, I think it goes the same way for the planet. It's absolutely the same. So if we choose to eat foods that don't require as much water, you know, an excessive amount of water production or water use, I guess. And if we choose to eat foods that are more local and we're not transporting them in from Australia or China or the clear other side of the world, then those little changes are going to add up. I think if we all did our part at an individual level, I mean, 7 billion people, 8 billion people in the world, I think it would definitely make a difference. And not even just individual level, even if we got more into schools, if we got more into hospitals, more into, you know, any institutionalized eating system, by, you know, like I think the one example is the Meatless Monday campaign. So I don't think there's anybody in the United States, at least, that hasn't heard of Meatless Monday. And I think it all started with just, you know, one small message, and it was attainable for people. And I think that's, you know, 1/7 of the week dedicated to eating less meat. We know meat is pretty rough, a rough system of making food for ourselves. So I think that it's totally possible to make a big difference with our diet, because we know that, yeah, there's a lot of resources that go into making food. And so I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I recently read a study that showed that diet really is one of the major drivers of climate change for individuals, like over our life.
Yeah.
You know, what we have control over. Of course, transportation is one of those factors, but actually diet could be even more significant, because we eat at least 3 times a day. And when you think about all of the impacts of that food coming to your plate, and a lot of us just aren't thinking about that. You know, my parents grew up on a farm, and, you know, and I grew up with parents who were farmers. So we always grew a lot of our own food, and we were very mindful of, you know, what it took to grow that food. And so many people have lost that connection. They don't have family that live on a farm. They never had time spending growing food. So a lot of times it's just kind of this clinical thing, you know, we just go to the store and buy these things, and we don't even understand how they got to the store.
Oh,
yeah. And that, you know, that brings up the whole idea of how much our food system has changed. You know, I talked about my mother and father growing up on a farm. And my mom grew up on a farm in Arkansas during the Depression and World War II. And it was a subsistence farm. So it was a farm that supplied everything the family needed, plus they had a little bit left over to sell. But it was really a biodiverse farm. They grew everything, peanuts, grains, all the grains came from their farm. They had cows that they sold only for milk. That was their cash, was selling the milk from the cows. But, you know, the grains they grew, the cows were pastured. You know, they had fruit trees, they grew vegetables and beans, and literally everything they needed came from the farm.
Everything.
And it was this biodiverse system. And of course, we live in a modern agricultural environment now. It's hard to reproduce that. And I don't even think we have to reproduce that. But it's an example of how things have changed. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about, you know, how you think things have changed in our food system that has resulted in a negative impact on the environment.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of like what you said. Everything about farming has changed, especially in the last century or two. So, I mean, a lot of good things came with the Industrial Revolution and the Green Revolution. I kind of had to like go back and study history to like figure out, to learn a little bit more about food systems and everything. And we got a lot of good things out of that, like a lot of technological advances, and we have big tractors and things that have helped us feed the world. I mean, really, I don't know that we would all be here, especially eating all the, you know, foods from anywhere we want at any time of year, if it wasn't for all of those huge changes that we saw take place. But I mean, that's the thing, is with all of that, that made us more reliant on, you know, gas, and that we eventually invented like pesticides and synthetic fertilizers and a lot of chemicals basically that we're now really reliant on to grow food. Mm-hmm. So the way like your grandparents probably did it was a lot more circular system, a lot more regenerative farming, a lot more biodynamic farming, whatever you want to call it now. There's like a lot of different ways to put it, but basically if you took something out of the soil, you put something back in it. So like you would make your own compost, or you would put your cow's manure back in the fields. Whereas now it's a lot more like, you know, lay down the seeds, give it water, put on some fertilizer. Once the plants start growing, spray it with some pesticides. It's just really different. And then we plow everything with tractors and use a lot of water. We're not as like, you know, we have a lot of weather changes. So sometimes we don't get the rainfall we expect. We have droughts, we have freezes that are kind of weird times. So basically, I think there have been a lot of changes with, you know, just like how we take care of the land, and also with how we take care of the resources that go into the soil, because if we don't take care of the soil, then we have a hard time getting good food from that soil. And so, yeah, that's one way. So the kind of the way we treat soil and what we're putting into the soil to grow our food. Another thing is also we've been clearing more forests. Like I know last year the Amazon rainforest got a lot of attention for being burned so that there would be more room for cattle production in Brazil. And so that's another thing that's a little bit different, is that we keep wanting to clear land for more room for food production instead of focusing more on like how we can really take advantage of the space we already have, and like treating the land better so that we get more food out of like what we already have, basically. I think
yeah, those are all really good points. It's very complicated. It's not one thing, it's many things, you know. There are many things going on with our food system, and it's really hard to, you know, we've developed this very modern productive food system. And it's really hard to just turn back the clock and go back to the way it used to be. One of my favorite professors, when I asked him, well, what should we do to fix the food system? He said, blow it all up and start over again. But that's really hard to do, right? So, you know, but I think it's exciting because I've gotten a chance to visit so many farms in the last 10 years, and farms of all sizes I see making huge differences, you know, like caring about the soil health, like, you know, I met a farmer who was a conventional big third generation farmer, and he's super interested in trying to make his, you know, his farm more sustainable and healthy for the environment. So he basically let one field that just never had good fertility. This one field just never did well. So he just thought, I'm gonna let nature have it back again. So he just let it go to indigenous wild, growth. And it completely improved the fertility of his entire farms. All of the neighboring fields, there was more biodiversity. There were bugs that ate the bad bugs. And so it's just interesting that we're seeing all of these positive changes, and that makes me happy. It's not all, there are a lot of people working really hard to do a better job in farming, which is exciting. Which brings me to my next point is, okay, we know things are grim and our food system is taking too large of a toll. It's using too many resources. It's using, like you said, water and fossil fuels. It's, it's not taking care of the soil. It's producing climate change. So what can we do to fix that? So let's talk about maybe 5 things that we could do in our daily habits, our daily diet, to help lighten our footprint on the planet.
So I did something like this. I came up with 8 actually, but I'm going to condense them into 5 because a lot of them kind of just go hand in hand anyway. But I had done a whole series about this, and I plan on making it into a blog post at some point. But I think there's many ways that we can make an effect on the planet through our diet. Number 1 for sure is to eat less meat, especially less red meat. It's the easiest thing you can do. It's the most memorable. There's, like I said, Meatless Monday has already been working on this for a long time, and just replacing animal products with plants. So trying to eat beans and nuts and seeds, tofu, soy, whatever, instead of animal products, especially red meat. Red meat requires, cows, they require a lot of land, a lot of water, we talk about it a lot, and they also produce a lot of methane gas. While they do I think they do serve a really important part in the food system, like in regenerative farming. They're just, the way we produce them right now is just mind-blowing, with confined animal feeding operations and factory farms, whatever you want to call it. It's really, really bad for the planet, the way we raise animals right now. So I would say eat less meat. If you are going to eat meat, try to find where you're getting it from, because there can be sustainably produced meat, but you definitely have to be careful, because the burgers at McDonald's, I could guarantee they're not going to be sustainably produced. So just try to eat less meat, eat more plants for sure. Number 1, solid.
That's right along.
Yeah.
That's what I say every day of my life. And I like that you pointed out, it doesn't have to be all the way, but just eat less, and beef, red meat is a big contributor. Beef is the number 1 contributor in diet. Yeah. So, there's just no talking around that point. And I like also what you said, that animal agriculture can be a positive thing for the environment.
Oh yeah.
If it's done in a holistic way, it can be part of biodynamic agriculture. It can be part of regenerative agriculture, but that's not how we're doing it right now, sadly. So
how we're doing it.
Pointing that out. So what about your second tip?
My second tip would be to, I would say, it's kind of controversial, but I'm for organic. I think you don't have to eat 100% organic by any means. I know it's expensive. We don't know if there are any clear health benefits to eating organic versus eating conventional produce. But I really believe that if you can't afford it, if it's just if it's like a canned black beans, if the organic is 10 cents more expensive than the regular, then I would just pay the difference if you can afford it. If you can afford it, obviously. I know that is an issue for a lot of people, is price and availability, obviously. So if it is an option to you, I would definitely say eat organic. I know organic is not like a win-all. It's not a gold star for everything, because there are loopholes kind of, I guess, in the system. And then there are arguments about organic doesn't produce as high of yield. So it doesn't make as much food per acre, basically, as conventionally produced. But I just have a big issue with all the chemicals that we're putting on the land that end up in our water system. They end up in the rivers. They take out, a lot of species of animals. They end up in the ocean, which has created dead zones in the ocean acidification. there are a lot of issues with all the chemicals that we put on our soil. So it's not necessarily a human health issue, it's a planet health issue. And that's why I think that organic is an important, part of eating for the planet, if you can do it. It's not the most important thing, but I think it's up there, in my opinion.
I like the way you position that, because I kind of have similar thoughts on organic, because I always want to keep in mind that, all people, part of sustainability is economics. All people have the right to healthy food. And, so if I just say everybody needs to only eat organic, then that's not really accessible for all of us, which is very sad. But at the same time, to me, it's not a nutrition issue. It is an environmental issue. To me, I'm not really as concerned about whether there's not as much vitamin C, whether there's more vitamin C or not more vitamin C. Although there are some studies that show that they have higher phytochemical levels. But to me, the soil, it's the beneficial bugs that are wiped out. And, we know that pesticide application in soil harms the soil microbiome. So, those are all issues to be concerned about. And so if possible, try to support, especially in produce. Produce is the big one. And, one thing, I know you're probably going to talk about this, but is, if you connect with your local community, a lot of farmers aren't certified organic, but you can find out what their practices are. Like I grow a lot of my own food and I don't use pesticides, so I call it my organic vegetable garden, but it's not certified organic. So I'm right with you when it comes to organic. So thanks for that. So what is your third tip now?
So that is my third tip.
Oh, sorry. I lost track.
No. So there you go. That's a good transition. So eating local and growing your own, whatever.
Okay.
It kind of all goes into one, really. So I have them separated, but eating local, eating in season, and growing whatever you can at home. Because then what's like going into your own food. Growing in season, then you're not fighting, it's not fighting nature basically to like grow strawberries at a time where strawberries really just don't grow well. And then eating local, obviously, like you said, you can come into contact with those farms and kind of know. And like you said, small farms, a lot of times they do have sustainable practices because they care about that, they have personal ties with their land, or they have some other incentive as to like why they want to make good food that isn't like going to be rough on their land, or isn't going to be trying on the planet. So a lot of times they are organic, they just can't afford the certification. So
right. Yeah. So I love that local food, connection too. I think it's so so I'm glad you and I agree on a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
All right. So now that I kind of took over your third tip, I'll let you go on for your fourth tip.
That's another point, actually. Another thing about the eat local is, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the average U.S. produce travels 1,500 miles to get from wherever it's going to our table. 1,500 miles, that's crazy. So local is technically, the best place, or the best number I've really found is like 100 miles or less that it's traveled. So I just want to throw it in there. That's another reason it's good to eat local, not only from the organic or, how things are produced standpoint, but also that it's not traveling on airplane, across the world to get to our table to see.
Yeah, I think that's we hadn't touched on that food travels that way.
Yeah.
And that's a benefit of local. So you're saving on the transportation, but also, keeping, supporting your local farmers, keeping economic livelihoods in your community. So it's really important. Yeah. Okay. So what is your next tip?
My next tip would be this one's kind of different and it's kind of difficult. I'm still trying to figure out a way where like the average person can really implement this. But I would say to support biodiversity would be to eat a variety of foods. So humans only eat about 200 plants, 200. when I've seen different numbers, but I've seen as high as 200,000 edible plant species are out there. So we could be eating, I don't know, like 100 times more, let's do the math,
Yeah.
1,000 times more plants than what we are eating right now. So, I mean, it's really difficult though to get like the average person on board with eating different types of food. I know that like quinoa became really popular, I don't know, a decade ago or so, whereas like before not many people were eating quinoa, and the chia seeds, and I don't know, there have been some interesting like popular foods. Like now I see a lot more purple carrots and like white carrots and stuff. So that's good, like different varieties of foods.
Mm-hmm.
But even beyond that, it's like whole plant species, I don't even honestly really know that much about all of the edible plant foods that are out there. But apparently there's 200,000 of them. And so if you can, try new foods. And even if that just means like looking in seed catalogs or whatever to just try growing new foods at home, or try new foods at fancy farm to market or farm to table restaurants. Just try new foods, because that supports a biodiverse environment, which is really important as the climate keeps changing. Because like I like to use the example of corn, like if we start getting a lot more droughts or something, and the corn that we currently rely on a lot can't survive those droughts, it's going to be really unfortunate if we don't have any backup corns where there's hundreds of other corn species, but nobody was saving those seeds, nobody was cultivating those crops, and so now they've been completely lost. Like it's really important that we keep all of the species that are currently in our system there, because we don't know the effect that it's going to have on the planet if they're gone, or what's going to happen to our food supply if they're gone.
Yes. So, that's such a good point. A lot of times people don't talk about biodiversity a lot. And I think it's really important, and it's going to be more, I think it's more attention is being placed on it. And, you know, I agree with everything you're saying. You know, we don't grow enough variety in our crops, which is bad for soil health. There's more pest pressure, because of when you have all these crops of one particular variety, the pests just come in there and, you know, they just fly and feed rather than have this biodiverse system. And then nutritionally too, you know, it's a more resilient food system if we have more biodiversity. And if we eat it, farmers grow it. One thing I learned in a recent California farm tour is that, you know, vegetables grow really quickly. If you've ever had your own vegetable garden, like you can harvest things pretty quickly. And so farmers have this amazing ability to just, like, for example, when kale got really popular, they were able to just switch out and start growing kale, and kale was everywhere. Now cauliflower, like, is so popular. Like farmers can respond to that so quickly. So it just kind of shows you that we could be more responsive, and just, if we start demanding all these things, farmers will grow it. So anyway, I love that. So now what's your next tip?
So my last tip is not really about what not to eat, but more about what you should eat. You should always eat your leftovers. So food waste is something I don't even think we touched on, but food waste is, I don't know, it's really up there. I mean, I think it's all important, but not wasting food is one of the most important things ever, because when you waste food, you waste the water, you waste people's time, you waste the transportation, everything that goes in the transportation, you waste the land, all of the inputs that went into growing that food, into making that food. If you don't eat it, it just goes to waste. At least if you eat it, you get the nutrition from it. I mean, it already did its part of the planet. It already, you know, did its time or whatever. So if you don't eat it, then it just is, I mean, all of that stuff goes to waste. And on top of that, it goes into a landfill where it's likely gonna create more methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is not something we need either. So it doesn't matter what you're eating, if it's plants or animals or something that came from the other side of the world or from your garden. If you don't eat it, then it's no bueno.
Right. So. I love that too. I mean, food waste is such a huge issue. You know, 40% of our food that's completely healthy, edible food is being thrown away. And most of it's happening at the consumer level in our food system. So that means like what you do, like when you go to the supermarket and you forget that you already had something in the back of your, refrigerator rotting away, or you throw something away that was probably fine. Didn't understand the expiration date. So
food labeling.
And then just like when you dish up too large of a portion, or if you go out to eat and you're not finishing your plate, all those things, you can take it home. I save all of my leftovers. So. And another part of that, which is kind of to me, it's a subcategory, is using the whole food, finding a lot of times when you go to the supermarket, you just see the trimmed down, like celery, for example. If you grow celery, all these beautiful green leafy, bushy leaves coming out of the celery, and all we get is the celery heart, the whole thing. Same things with your beets. You could eat the tops too. So finding use the whole plant, and throwing away less is another thing you can do.
Yeah, that's true. That's a whole other thing I didn't even touch on. Like, you can eat the leaves of the strawberry, just like throw the whole strawberry in your smoothie. You won't even.
There's just so many things. And every place around the world, we have all these wild things that are edible too. We need to learn more about that. My mother, as a child, she would pick wild greens. They never grew them. Why grow them when they're in the forest? They do exactly the greens. And most cultures had that tradition of harvesting wild greens,
Yeah.
So that's another cool thing. If you're even get more interested, is foraging.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, a little bit, like, for every plant that you eat, you might be getting a whole nother like nutrient profile. You might be getting a whole bunch of new antioxidants, and every food offers something. So we might be missing out on a bunch of foods, a bunch of nutrition and stuff that's out there that we don't even really just think about eating. So it's all connected. I mean, it really is planet and your body. Like, you eat better for the planet, you are doing better for the body. If you're eating less meat, you're probably, eating more fiber, eating more vitamins and minerals that aren't found in meat. I mean, all of these tips, I think they all have a positive effect on your health as well as the planet. So. Yeah,
you're right. They're all lined up. What's good for the planet is also good for humans, which is nice when things line up like that. And research supports that too.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to point out for everybody that I'm going to be including all these notes from our interview with Stacy in my blog that accompanies this interview. So check it out, and I'll include the tips that Stacy provided for us. And I think you're going to share one of your favorite recipes with us too, right, Stacy?
Yep. So I've got a lot. For me, I think the easiest thing to do is to just like make a pasta, like a whole grain pasta with tomato sauce or olive oil or whatever vegetables you have. That's like my go-to. My husband is so tired of hearing about it. So I try to do something else that's really easy, really affordable, good for the planet. It's all plant-based. So my recipe I was going to share is black bean tostadas. So all you need are black beans. You could buy them in a bag or in bulk or whatever. Or be plastic-free, that's cool. And you just soak the beans overnight, and then you boil them, or you could just get a can. That's what we tend to do, honestly. It's the canned version. And then you refry them. So just like put a little bit of oil and heat them up, and then you just mash them like a refried black bean. For the tostadas, you just buy corn tortillas, and you can bake them in the oven to make them like toasty. They taste a lot better that way than if you just buy them already packaged in their hard form. Or you can even put them in the microwave. That's another tip. You want to be really fast, you just put them in the microwave for like 2 or 3 minutes, and the tortilla will harden into a tostada. And then you just put the beans on top of the tostada. You can make like a pico de gallo. So you just cut up tomatoes, onions, cilantro, lime juice, salt. You put that on top. You can add some avocado if you want. Just watch avocados are spotty for the planet. And then I accompany it with usually like salsa verde, like a green sauce. So an easy one is roasted tomatillos. They're like the green tomatoes, and they come with like a little leaf. They're getting more and more popular, I think. That's how they make salsa verde. It's like green tomatoes with a sticky leaf on the outside. You just take the leaf off. To make it roasted, you just put them in a saute pan until like the edges are black or dark brown or whatever. And then you boil them, and you throw it in a blender with whatever chilies or like peppers, you have like jalapenos or serranos or whatever for some spice, for some more flavor, and then cilantro, garlic, salt, yeah, some water, blend it up. Easy peasy. Takes no time, super cheap, healthy. That's good.
Sounds great. Well, I'm going to be sharing some of these tips on the blog too, so you'll have to check it out at sharonpalmer.com. And I'll share all of Stacy's, links to her social media so you can follow her too. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a great conversation. I think we have a lot of inspiring tips for everybody to make a difference with their fork, right?
Yes, I think so.
Well, thanks for joining us, and thank all of you for joining us out there too. This has been Sharon reminding you to eat and live well.